welcome to Brainworm, I guess. Um, why have you making me reading this? What is Worm?
So, Worm, as you have been forced to know for a very long time, because I have been annoying everyone for several months, mentioning it every
Yes.
time, every opportunity that I get. Worm is a web serial written by a guy called J.C. McRae, better known as Wildbow on the internet. That's his pen name. And Worm is a superhero story, which apparently you did not know about. I thought you did.
No, I very, very, very pissed. I did, like, people were like, when it comes to like the public perception of Worm, it seems is like people know about like it's about like teenagers and stuff, which yuck. But I didn't know it was about superheroes, which is like double yuck. But now I'm stuck reading it. It's a superhero story about teenage girls and more.
Yeah, you are stuck in reading it. You have barely scratched the surface. Like, you're not 5% into this story.
Yeah, as I was going through it, I was like, okay, a list of contents. There's part 2, a part 3, a part 12, a part 22. 30 parts plus extra.
Yeah. The epilogues are like an arc of themselves, so you could say there's 31. If
Yeah.
you have you ever read the 5 books in A Song of Ice and Fire?
No.
Well, like, I use that example because it's very close in word count. Like, the whole of Worm and the 5 books that we have for A Song of Ice and Fire so far.
I mean, I don't want to come off as the worm here, but I've only read the Brandon Sanderson is like the closest. The Stormlight Archives, those are the closest to like the big epic fantasies books that I've read.
Yeah, it's like 3 books of Stormlight Archive. Maybe a little
Brilliant.
bit more than that.
Okay. Brilliant.
Yeah, so welcome to Brainworm, the show where at the end you get to decide who was the brain and who was the worm. We're going to be discussing, hopefully, the whole series and ideally an arc every episode, just so it doesn't last for way too long. There is no schedule. Let me make that clear.
Yeah, no, we're both very busy people.
Yeah, there might
Very
be
busy.
a schedule eventually, but so far there is not. This is our first time even trying to record this, so this is fucking around and finding out. As you might have seen that meme where it's like 2024, 2025, fuck around and find out, and then 2026. If it's too insane, kill self. If normal, start podcast.
No, but I've... Oh, and this is the podcast you're starting.
Yeah, so we are normal.
Okay, I don't feel normal after reading Worm.
You should get used to that. It will become your normal.
Yeah, I've been bullied, coerced, and corralled into reading Worm.
Yes.
And unfortunately, it's not half bad.
Hell yeah.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately. If it was bad,
Alright.
you could, no. But you don't have that choice.
Yeah. Okay. Enough fucking around. Let's find out. Let's start with discussing Worm.
Yeah, should we
Which I think-
jump into the introduction, or should we talk about how we met this story first? What do you think?
Oh, yeah, right. Because I only really know about Worm. Like I've known it through like cultural osmosis. You know, kind of like how like you just sort of kind of know what like a Danganronpa is, or what's something else that's similar. Uh, the Stormlight Archives is also sort of similar. Like
Yeah.
you just sort of see it around, but you're not sure, and you know there's like a fan base for it, but it's not exactly like something. And then, like as I became friends with you and other such wormheads, yeah, that's when the bullying really started. You know, that's when the nightmares came. That's when my life became hell. And now I'm reading Worm.
Yeah. Hopefully you don't trigger from all of the bullying, but if you do, I'm in another continent, so I should be fine. The ripples won't reach
Oh,
me.
I wish you would trigger me into reading a better series.
Well, I'm going to have to ask you that again, like every time a big moment comes up, every like three chapters.
Uh, all right. What about you, Amy? How did you find out about Worm?
So there is a little bit more of a story on my end because, by the way, I think that was the first time my name was mentioned. I didn't introduce myself. My name's Amy.
Yes, and
We are both writers, by the way. We should have also have said that.
I would like to I would like to say aspiring writer myself. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, writers,
Yeah.
people that are interested in prose.
Okay. So the way I found out about Worm was I was living with two roommates, and the boyfriend of one of them knew about Pale, which is another story by the same author. And we were talking one day, just me and her, and she knew that I was a writer, and I was talking about how I was like disillusioned with pursuing a traditional publisher, and I was thinking about like writing a shorter series and publishing the books individually on Kindle. And so she asked me, "Well, do you know about Pale?" Just like as an example of a web
A web
serial
novel.
that I didn't even
Yeah.
like. I didn't know that web serials really existed to a serious extent in English-speaking communities.
Yeah, because there's certainly like a Japanese sort of like
Yeah,
yeah, web novel communities and stuff. A lot of isekai gets yeah, starts off as web novels, web serials.
yeah, because mostly in Japan and China, this is like an industry. In Japan, you have the website Shousetsuka ni Naro, where a lot of web
Yes.
novels start and become light novels later. And
Yeah.
I believe it is Chinese, though it also has a lot of stories in English. But there is a site or an app that is just called Web Novel, and a lot of Chinese stories come from there. So I didn't know that there was such a thing like that actually made me look at it and say, oh, it's possible to pursue this as a creative career, to make these stories in English and just have them by myself, and people will support it through Patreon. So she told me about Payo in that context, like, oh, you should consider this. And then I think it was like the following day, I was talking with both of them, my friend and her boyfriend. And then he was just telling me about what Payo is about, what the story entails, and I looked it up. Like I told him to send me the link. He forgot, but I looked it up anyway. And I found out that, well, he also wrote a couple of other series. So I started with Peyo. I read like the first two chapters of it, which, if you don't know, Peyo is it's an urban fantasy story, and it's more like occult and supernatural stuff. It's
So
actually very, very different in tone.
it immediately makes me think. I'd immediately like imagine it's like Boogie Pop Phantom, if you've ever read it like that.
I have not read Boogie Pop, but I know what you're talking about. It's
Yeah.
more like uh, it's not stylized in that way. It's kind of like supernatural. Like there are these creatures around in the world, and there are like specific rules that we have to use, almost like a creepypasta element to it. Like
I see.
they come into existence through people's belief. And the big thing in Pale is that like anything that you say, you're making an oath. Like you can't really lie. So, like at the start of the series, like these creatures ask the protagonist to look into something, and they have to be very precise about the wording. We're not telling you to fix it, because if we say that and you agree and you fail to, there will be consequences. So we can only ask you to look into it. So that kind of like wordplay stuff that I think is very interesting.
Why didn't you get me to read Pale?
Because I need you to get through Worm first, otherwise you Also, Pale is like more than twice as long as Worm.
Yeah, Pale seems like more up my alley, personally.
No, Pale is like almost 4 million words long. Yeah, it's like bigger than the Malazan Book of the Fallen. So
Okay.
I think that it's 2025 now. Maybe by 2038 we can get to Pale or something.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's how it started. I looked up the name. I also saw that there was this story called Worm that I thought was interesting. I looked, well, a superhero story. That doesn't sound like something that you would expect to write in prose, because like all the action and stuff. And I started reading it. And Pale also sounds like more up my alley. But I got into Worm because it was shorter and just easier to start trudging through. So that's how I got into Worm, by someone in my house, not in my house, in the house I shared with them, telling me about it. And that's how I found out about its existence. And then I started realizing, like, this thing has an internet presence that somehow I completely failed to ever tap into. Like, everyone knows about this, but no one talked about it until I mentioned it. It was very weird.
Yeah, like Worm is just something. Yeah, I just would like scroll past on like Archive of Our Own and like, yeah, okay, I'm not into that. That's the sort of like thing Worm is to me for the past couple years. It's just like another fandom thing that I just sort of am somewhat aware of.
Yeah, I had never heard about it. Never, not once.
Yeah. And would you say that like because you are currently making a web serial yourself, The Deathless, is that like was like how did Worm inspire that at any point?
So Worm does not inspire The Deathless when it comes to the writing, but it definitely played a part in me deciding to publish it. Because
I see.
I had been struggling to finish another book for a long time. And at one point I just like sat with myself, looking inside of my mind, and said, well, I consider myself a competent writer, and I have been writing for way too long to not have something to show for it. So at the same time, our good friend Trixie the Golden Witch gave me an advice where she said that if you're trying to look for like a structure and it hasn't been working, then try to add more chaos into it. And so I just like decided on the spot, but I'm going to start publishing something by June. I just decided it. And then the story that I started working on was actually the one that is a lot more similar to Worm. But I realized, no, it's probably better for me to go with The Deathless right now. So the story does not inspire it, but it made me decide to, like, seeing that this is an alternative and it's possible to have an internet presence and potentially a career as a writer, which has been like my dream since I was 10 or something. That played a part into it. And since you mentioned the story, if you are listening to this, I'm a writer. I'm publishing a web serial called The Deathless. You can find it by just going to your browser URL and looking for thedeathless.net, or just throw The Deathless in Blue Sky. And in Blue Sky, you're going to find me, and also on Royal Road. So it's a WordPress, a Royal Road, and I'm at The Deathless on Blue Sky. It's an isekai fantasy story, has nothing to do, like, setting-wise with Worm, but it's similarly dark. It's not going to be nearly as long, though. And we will talk more about it as these episodes go by, I'm sure.
Yes. All right. Cool. I think that's everything in terms of introductions.
Yeah.
We can go into the introduction of the story. of actually get to Worm.
Yeah. So uh, I will I will figure out a better way to do this in the future, but I did write a very simple like summary of each chapter, and the summaries get progressively shorter. Like I only really wrote one for the first chapter. I'm just going to read it verbatim, and we can then start discussing it. Something that I will say for the audience is that don't try to follow this in a chapter by chapter basis, because we might just randomly talk about like the conclusion of something. So if you're listening to this, make sure that you're either not bothered by spoilers, or you have already read the whole of Arc 1 up to
Yeah,
the Danny interlude.
yeah. Again, this is my first time reading it, so it's not like I know what happens in part 2 or part 3, etc. But yeah, we will just be talking about part 1 in general for the most part,
Yeah.
and as we go along.
So what I wrote for chapter 1 is that we start in a classroom in the head of a girl called Taylor Hibbert. She's anxious about the end of class, and because of this, she's barely paying attention to a class about worthy issues she had been looking forward to. She thinks about how her teacher, Mr. Gladly, is the kind who tries to be friends with students, and how she dislikes that. When class ends, we learn why she was so anxious about the clock. Taylor has been running to the bathroom as soon as lunch break starts, as she eats there to avoid her bullies, Madison, Sophia, and Emma, who used to be Taylor's best friend. This time her bullies find her there, the empty cans and bottles of soda and juice on her head, over the stall and into her backpack. Then she's left alone and has a fit of rage. There is another reason for her state of mind. Taylor has recently triggered, which is in this world means awakening some kind of power. She can control bugs, and she wonders about how easy it would be to go carry on her bullies and make them regret everything they put her through. She doesn't do it, instead she skips the rest of classes for the day and goes back home. So that's everything that happens in the first chapter of Worm.
Yep, pretty succinct. Overall, it is a strong introduction, especially as I sort of skimmed over it a second time. Like the opening line, class ended in 5 minutes, and all I could think was, an hour is too long for lunch. It is a powerful way to start it, because an hour is too long for lunch is so contradictory to the way the average sort of teenager thinks about class in school, that it immediately makes you think about well, what is wrong? You know, it makes you sort of curious as to the rest of it, and as we see why unfolds as she's tormented by her bullies, one of which, Emma, is, yeah, as you said, her ex-best friend. Another thing that I think is interesting is we're already jumping across, but how the first thing that Taylor sort of talks about mainly is Mr. Gladly, this teacher, this guy that's popular with the students. He's a teacher that people like. People call him Mr. G. People like this teacher, and she has very different opinions, which sets her out as being more antisocial and more gloomy, and that sort of general personality. And it parallels with a character that shows up in chapter 6, and how she views that authority figure.
Yeah. I think there's a lot in just this first chapter, looking at it as how it serves as an introduction to a story. As you say, she's thinking about this teacher that is she describes him as a cool kid that became a teacher recently, so he's not that older than then, it seems. At least that's the impression I get. And she thinks oh, I wonder what he would think if he heard my opinion on it. And throughout the chapter, there's all this. You're getting hints that she's troubled by something, but it's not said what it is. She's looking at the clock, and then she's complaining about the teacher, and then she looks back at another class member of hers, who is Madison, and you don't get a description of why she's doing this. But you understand it later, when that's because it's one of her buddies. So
Yeah, it's
without
there's
having to tell us that this is recurrent, you get the feeling that it is simply because she's going through it without thinking. Like she doesn't address the fact that she's doing this every
yeah.
day, basically.
Yeah, and like after after she like sort of criticizes like Mr. Gladly in her own, head, she's like thinking about like how he's like, yeah, just a popular kid that sort of like became a teacher. That sort of like defamatory sort of way of sort of criticizing him. She immediately goes into talking about Madison once again, and like it's not like as damning. She's not like overly cynical in a way that like it's not like she's constantly saying all these like bad things about them, which I think there's no like direct insult. It's more like it's more like alluding to the fact that like Madison is not a good person, and like the boy, yeah, guys liked her, I think, because she's appealing without being intimidating. If only they knew. Like, at no point does she ever call them like a bitch or something along those lines. It's more of just like a judgment of their character, which, considering what like Madison and that do to her, it is sort of like it shows off like the ways that she sort of thinks. There is a sort of pureness to her.
Yeah, even as these people have been horrible to her in the past, like she's putting herself down when she compares their appearances, and she's like, "Oh, well, I'm the weird kid in the class with hoodies
Yes.
and the glasses, and they are like the
No.
beautiful people, the athletic one,
No.
the
No
model."
feminine. No feminine features besides for my long curly hair.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you get the sense that, as you said, she's not like outright like saying anything to them or even thinking about them in that sense. It's very much about the mental situation that she's in, that she has been trying to keep herself under control for 3 months by this point, and so she's triggered at everyone and even the teacher because she
Yeah.
is in this fucked up situation that she can't do anything about. She even when the bullies like leave the bathroom, and she thinks about how she has been keeping herself under control for 3 months, and in that moment she couldn't care about it anymore. So she is very much like trying to keep her own reins in, because now she has this power that could be dangerous, and so that pushes her to try and be
Yes.
a better person, because it would have more serious consequences to her bullies than the bullying to her has had so far.
Yes. Yeah, like because I think it is said at the end of this chapter that she does want to be a superhero. That is like a goal of hers. Yeah, I was. Yeah, I was going to be a superhero. That was the goal I used to calm myself down at moments like these. Like that is. It says a lot about her character.
Yeah, I
And
like
again, like,
where that quote continues. If you, I can read that if you want, or if you have something else to say before.
no, you can go ahead.
It goes, "I was going to be a superhero. That was the goal I used to calm myself down at moments like this. It was what I used to make myself get out of bed on a school day. It was a crazy dream that made things tolerable. It was something to look forward to, something to work towards. It made possible to keep from dwelling on the fact that Emma Barnes, leader of the trio, had once been my best friend." And taking aside that end is like a cliffhanger to get you into the next chapter, it starts with, "I was going to be a superhero," and then it immediately goes into how she's like rationalizing her situation, how she's trying to cope with the fact that this is going on. Like, she's not oblivious to any of this. I think that in chapter 2 she very specifically says like, "Oh, rationale aside." So she's very much intentionally thinking about the circumstances that she's in and the repercussions that going carry on the school would have. And she,
Yes.
like, it feels like someone that is very self-aware for a teenager, which
Yeah.
kind of hints that there's more going on with her already.
Yeah. It's not that like her like antisocialness is like, yeah, it's not like juvenile in a way that I sort of brought up before, but Onani Master Kurosawa, like that starts off with the main character going like, yeah, everyone has to stand up in class and say their dreams, and he's like, huh, don't you idiots know? Most of your dreams will never come true. And like and he has to sort of like grow up from that basically throughout the story. Meanwhile, in this one, it's not specifically like it's not framed as her like being juvenile in a way that her like antisocialness is or her gloominess is, but it's also not framed in a way that's like that she knows better than most people, I think.
Yeah.
Like there's still like an immaturity like present in her. Like it's pretty leveled writing.
Yeah, and she's not very much close to the stereotype of the quiet person in class, because she had this friendship with Emma. They used to sleep at each other's house all the time, so she was like going out. We also get the fact that she went to nature camp, I think it was, and then she came back from nature camp. So she's not the quiet kid that doesn't talk to anyone. It feels like she was very much a very normal girl until a couple months ago.
Yes. And it's just sort of socially sort of escalated. Yeah, until like sort of everyone just sort of like lets it slide, or gangs up on her. And it's like a somewhat yeah, like a new development.
Yeah, we get back to that when the Danny interlude rolls around, and it kind of indicates to you that this bullying is going to be a point of contention going forward. Like there's going to be quite a few different characters looking at this, but so far we're only getting the feeling that we're not entirely sure why it started, but it is something recent, and it got bad enough to the point where she triggered, which, once again, when you go through something traumatic in this world, there is a chance that you're going to develop a power, and that is called the trigger event.
Yes.
So we're not sure how it got there, but it was bad enough for that to happen.
Yeah, we do see somewhat of the origins of superheroes, somewhat in the Danny interlude. But yeah, we'll get to that. While we're talking about the superhero aspect of it, there is something that I thought was interesting. Was that like in this first chapter, it starts off being in Mr. Gladley's classroom, and the first thing he does is like, there is homework for this weekend, and that homework is think about capes and how they impact the world around you. Like that is the assignment, and I think that like that could be like sort of like where the story is going. From like what I like sort of like know about it, it's like this like work assignment is like sort of foreshadowing for what the themes of this story will be. Is like capes and how they impact the world. Superheroes. Capes are the term for superheroes in this story.
Yeah, like capes would be people with power, so that includes both heroes and villains.
Yeah.
And if you're a civilian and you have a power, you're also a cape. Like even if you're not working as a hero or as a villain.
Same with mutants from X-Men or quirks from My Hero Academia.
Yeah.
This one is capes.
But it is interesting because when Mr. Gladly gives that assignment, it really feels like the author telling you, like...
Yes.
Yeah, or maybe telling himself, I guess. Like, this is where I'm going with this story, maybe, potentially.
Yeah, that was like sort of like what I was like. Yeah, what I was thinking. Yeah, like when I first like read through it, I thought like it was just sort of like a thing. It was just sort of like a decide. There wasn't, but I think there is probably a point to that one.
Well, you're going to have to suffer through the answer.
Any other notes on chapter 1?
Not for me, no.
I think one of the things that I thought was interesting, or like sort of weird, I'm not sure if it's a critique or not, was that in the description of her three bullies, while they're standing outside of her bathroom stall, pouring juice on her, she describes all three of them, being attractive and stuff, and but there is like a sort of, Madison is cute, a late bloomer. She describes her as there's a sort of like bitterness in the way that she describes each of the characters. And Emma has had all the curves the guys wanted. She was like good looking enough to get those. How do I put it? Then like Sophia was that like Sophia herself sort of has like the most like flattering and like the least. There seems like the least amount of cynicism behind it, whereas like just dark skinned with a slender athletic build. She just developed as a runner on the school track team. Like that one seems like the less like Madison is constantly like said like, oh, all the guys like her because she's cute and stuff. Emma, all the guys like her because she's curvy and stuff. And Sophia is the only one who doesn't have anything like that. Yet she's not, she's not Taylor's best friend, ex-best friend. She's just sort of like another one.
Yeah, it seems like Taylor knows Emma and Madison better than she knows Sophia.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like sort of like the most like general, just sort of like describing the way she looks and the way she is. As opposed to like saying anything like particularly, yeah, deeper on it.
Though to use that to transition into chapter 2, in chapter 2 there is a description where Taylor talks about how she used to be best friends with Emma, but when she went out for nature camp, and when she came back, Emma was calling Sophia her best friend. So there was a new relationship that built there while Taylor was away. And so the story is hinting at, not that this is particularly important to their dynamic at this moment, but it makes sense that would stand out to you, because she actually does not know Sophia as well.
I see. Okay. Yeah. No, I was wondering if it was just sort of like because like sandwiched in between like those two different descriptions, it felt like it did stand out as like just different and more general, more plain flat.
I now that you bring it up, I actually just noticed something. It's interesting that is the closest to flattering, because Taylor herself was like this unathletic kid, but when she got her powers and decided to become a hero, she started like working out and going for jogs and going for runs. So there could be an element there of her like appreciating Sophia in a way, because Sophia has the athletic build and she has just recently started to pursue that herself. She doesn't want to be like a weak person anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, there is like because like in chapter 6 she does meet a superhero, and it's in the way like she sort of like she has like more like respect and like for that superhero, and more she's not like cynical or like really like comparing herself. Well, she compares herself to him, but like she's not like saying it in a way that like she's not like annoyed that like Arms Master, the superhero, is like better than her or like in any way. Yeah, you're probably right. I think like she probably respects Sophia on like the athletic side.
Well, we will get to Arms Master later. So
yeah.
For now, I'm going to read what I had for chapter 2, if that's okay.
Go for it.
Taylor dwells on her friendship with Emma for a little bit. She thinks about how intimate they were, how they alternated sleeping in each other's houses, and how crushed she felt when, after coming back from nature camp, Emma was calling Sophia her best friend and using the secrets Taylor shared with Emma to hurt her instead. We find out that Taylor has been using her power to control spiders to make a costume for herself out of spider silk. We learn about a notebook she kept about everything she knows related to capes and her plans of becoming a superhero, which has now been destroyed by the juices and sodas her bullies spilled in her backpack. By the end of the chapter, Taylor decides that she's going to stop procrastinating and go out in costume to be a hero for the first time this weekend instead of when the school year ends. So there are a couple of things that I want to talk about. The first is that Can you recapture what went in your mind when you read the word costume for the first time?
It was.
Because I know you
I think
love
regret.
superheroes.
Regret. It felt like my world was ending. It all came tumbling down. Like I sincerely did not know until like the second chapter as she goes in extensively about like making costumes and like because I think like this specifically because like I think this chapter is like less interesting than the first one and like how it like sort of like spends so much time just talking about costumes. I was like, oh God, oh please, oh yeah,
Now it's my time to defend this story because the overly long talk about costumes here is mainly about establishing two things. The first is that Taylor is a cape geek, absolutely. She's very much a cape geek. But the second one is to show you this mindset that she has of preparing. She has been going through this and taking notes and studying and looking at capes online and trying to find everything she knows about their powers, like the powers that be in the city that she's in, Brockton Bay. So it's not about the costume. The costume is just a way to indicate how she has been dwelling on this.
I mean, I think there's like because like the way in which she seems to think about these, like she sort of like she stores all this like information in her head and like explains it very flatly, that it becomes somewhat like boring to read through.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you say that it's better utilized in the story than My Hero Academia, which also started with a similar, but like then you know
Mm.
and then they're actually utilized like Deku's like obsession with superheroes at any point. Would you say this like it was used better in this story?
Yeah, hard to say if it's used better because My Hero Academia is immediately a lot more emotional about it. Like we get to see this guy being an obsessive geek, not really a down to earth geek by any means. Like by the end of the first episode, he like throws himself into danger to try and save Bakugo, even though he does not have any power. So
Yeah.
it's it's different because it has been like it's worked into Deku's character a lot more because Deku has been a superhero geek from since he was a child. And the
Yes.
sense that I get for Taylor is that it's more of a recent development. I would say each approach fits its own story better because Worm, despite all the crazy shit that is going to happen later, is a much more down to earth. Here are the repercussions of this kind of story. So if you flip these around, you put the way that Taylor deals and talks about it in My Hero Academia or how Deku does it in Worm. Like if you were to put those characters in the other story, none of them would fit.
Okay.
I was
Yeah, no, I get
definitely
what you
not
mean. Yeah.
say that My Hero when we're talking about the long run, absolutely Worm does more with it. Like no doubt about it.
Yeah. Yeah, like how it like explores like the Pacific because like both of them both Deku and Taylor have notebooks and like written down and stuff and they do research and stuff, but
Yeah.
it's never really becomes like a plot point at any point of My Hero Academia besides from like him just sort of like getting over emotional and starstruck over certain heroes. That's sort of like the extent of it for the most part.
Yeah,
At like the first couple chapters.
they're geeks and the similarity I would say is that both of them want to be heroes and they are looking at heroes as like the reason why they are so obsessed with heroes, both of them, is because they want to be one themselves. So that part is very much the same for
Yes.
both characters.
And both of them dealt with bullying and stuff, but both choose not to use like their powers in like for revenge or anything. Like from like the immediate story, the beginning of the story. Like Spider-Man in like the original run and like in quite a few interpretations. Like he immediately goes into like Peter immediately like uses his power like just for like whatever gain he can before the Uncle Ben speech.
Yeah, these two characters are like dwelling on the repercussions of what using their powers would be like a lot more.
Yeah, like immediately.
Yeah, from the get go.
Peter had like no, yeah, Peter had no qualms of like using it like just in his daily life to get more things until he accidentally leads to Uncle Ben getting shot. Spoilers for Spider-Man,
Oh,
I guess.
someone in the audience has not seen any of it. I'm sure.
What? Uncle Ben dies? No.
Oh, he was my favorite character. I also had a paragraph that I kept note of for chapter 2, which is after Taylor arrives home and she's by herself trying to still working through the mental throes of the bullying that she went through and the humiliation of everyone staring at her as she went back home covered in like juice stands. She thinks, and I quote, "Okay, so the first thing that came to mind was yet another reason to kill the trio. It wasn't a serious stuff. I was angry, but it was like I was going to actually kill them. Somehow, I suspect that I'd hurt myself before I hurt them. I was humiliated, frustrated, pissed, and I always had a weapon available. My power. It was like having a loaded gun in your hand at all times. Except my power was that great, so maybe it was more like having a taser. It was hard not to think about using it when things got really bad. Still, I didn't think I had the killer instinct in me." So she's actually thinking about what we just talked about. Like it was hard not to think about using it when things got really bad, which is this idea that as soon as you have a gun, you want to use it. And if you have the capacity to produce a gun, other people will want to make the gun for them. And she's although she says she is not going to do it, she by this point she has thought about doing like 2 or 3 times she thought about attacking the bullies, but she keeps once again being like very self-aware for her age, which I think she's like 16 at this point, I think, and she's trying to use this desire of hers to be a hero to keep herself from doing something which already tells you that this is possible. Like as soon as you have people with actual powers, that messes with the status quo, especially if you can't keep tabs on all of them.
Yeah. Is there a is like her like comparing her power to a gun and then de-escalating it and saying, well, no, it's not that powerful, it's not that great, it's more like a taser. And then is that like contradictory to like the next couple chapters where we see like how much she does know about her like powers and like how it can be dangerous in terms of like using spiders to like and like bees and wasps and sending people into like anaphylactic shocks from like bee stings and like how it like can be dangerous and it can kill people. But she like sort of like tones it down and just says, well, it's more like a taser.
Yeah.
Do you think that's contradictory?
Yes, I'd say there are two sides to it. Like it is contradictory character-wise because she has been using her powers and looking into like doing research on bugs and spiders and bees and what each of them will do to a person. She's very much aware of that fact, so I think it is contradictory on a character level that she would think about it that way. But in a more narrative structure level, I would not say it's contradictory because it's like hinting at, oh, this power is not that good, and then as we see later, oh no, it's actually a lot better than we expected. There is that effect, but when it comes to the character, yeah, I'd agree it's a little contradictory.
Okay.
Though I do like the sentiment of immediately like comparing it to a gun, because
The second she thinks it's a gun, she immediately goes,
no, I'm not
actually, it's a taser."
that dangerous, okay?
Yeah,
Like there
yeah.
there is an there feels like there is an element there of her being like, It's kind of fucked up that I have this."
I could go carry on all their asses, but you know,
Yeah, I don't want to,
I could.
but I can.
I like first-person narratives, POVs. They're good. They're fun.
I have a much bigger preference for third person limited. There are few first person narratives where I look at and I think, oh, this works. Worm is one of them for sure. Like there
Yeah.
is a level of skill necessary to tell so much in so little, which is a very different style from how I write. So I find it fascinating that there is so much, like the fact that it is this rather crude prose and first person does not get in the way of the emotions, and that's harder to do than most people realize. I think that's all for chapter 2.
Yeah, yeah, I don't think I have any more notes.
Yeah, so chapters 3 and 4 in particular are very close together. We can talk about them as the same thing because they basically there is one event for the rest of the arc. My note on it is, as Taylor heads out in costume for the first night, we get some background on the city of Brockton Bay and its layout. The city used to thrive in the import and export business, but as this business dried up and sections of the city became unruly from having so many people who didn't have a job, while the richest citizens turned their investments to other industries. In the late 90s, Brockton Bay became a hotspot for villains, especially because they had so many people who needed work that they could now employ. Now the area around the docks is noticeably poorer and precarious than the rest of the city. Taylor sees members of a gang called the Asian Bad Boys, which are led by a man called Lung, a parahuman she knows from her research who has been forcibly recruiting Korean, Japanese, Vietnamese, and Chinese young boys around the city. She approaches while staying out of sight and hears Lung saying that they're going to shoot kids. So, do you have any thoughts on like that section where she's just walking through the city and thinking about its history and its layout and the heroes' big building, the Protectorate headquarters?
Once again, a part of me was like that, like again, because it is like so matter of fact the way she describes, like the way she describes the place she lives. There's not like that sort of like that underlying amount of like contempt in like the way she ever like describes any of them, the way she actually, describes like her bullies and stuff, or like, which I think at one point it is kind of like, it is so matter of fact that it is kind of dull in the way she describes it, but the information given itself is interesting, I feel. I'm also like interested by the fact that like the very first villain we encounter has like a racial component to it.
Hmm.
That also sort of like makes me curious as to like how much like that plays into the rest of the story.
Well, I'm not going to answer that question.
Okay.
But you are correct, yeah. I specifically like the comment about how in the 90s this city became a hotspot for villains because it's already like bringing the timeline back and showing you like, oh, this has been going around for a while. It is having effects on society and on our lives, and throughout this first arc we keep doing this. Like we're going to get a lot more information
Yeah.
about the
Yeah.
heroes in
Similar.
the past and what they did and how it relates to our current living situation.
Yeah. In the same way that like we're alluding to like how much of bullying that Taylor has like suffered. Like it is something that hasn't just started. It's been around for like a good couple months. Uh, the same here. It's like it isn't like a completely new development. It has been like a thing for a while.
Yeah. I- It's
Good world
it's
building.
particularly interesting when you know a little bit of the history behind how Wildbow got to this story, which is basically like he has been a writer and has been developing and trying out different stories in this world for a long time. I believe that the first one is all the way back from 2002. So there are like a lot of excerpts
Whoa.
from characters in this world, all of whom you are going to meet eventually. And I have not read any of them myself, but the world has been developed. Like, there are things that you're going to see in the future that hint at him obviously not knowing everything about the story, but Taylor, very much how she's thinking about it in the story, Taylor as a character was a recent development, which is why the website is called Parahumans, because that was going to be the name. And then it became Worm when he came up with Taylor's character. So she very much feels like a character that is now part of a whole world that she has recently walked herself into, and she's not the gear turning anything at this point, because that fits with how the author himself wrote the story and got here.
Yeah, now that you mention it, I think I can agree with that. At least like so far, what I've seen of her like feeling as like just yet another person in like a greater,
Like a worm.
yeah, a worm in a world. And there has been no worms so far in part 1. That is my first biggest critique. There are no worms yet.
I think that the word worm comes up actually.
Word shows up. Ward shows up. There's like a thing that happens in like chapter 6. They're talking about the ward.
Yeah, no, but I'm pretty sure.
There's a worm.
Unless I'm misremembering something. Okay, I'm going to look through all of the chapters and Ctrl F. Worm.
No,
there is
none.
none. Okay, then
No.
Then I guess I was the worm.
Looks like you're the worm and I'm the brain.
No, that's for the audience to decide. Oh. So what happens at the end of chapter 3 and the whole of chapter 4 and 5 is that because of what Taylor heard, she noticed that these people are going to kill kids. I'm the only one on scene.
Yes.
There is not enough time to call anyone. By the way, I'm going to point out the fact that she thinks about how she doesn't have a cell phone. Let's put a pin on that. We're going to go back to it. I think it's a very important detail. And then she just decides, I guess I have to attack these people because there's no one around.
Yes.
I have my power. And she sends the swarm on them. It's the first time that she sends the swarm upon someone on the story. And
we see.
Like, basic goons can do nothing about it.
Yeah, it is. It is interesting though. The first like fight scene is like her just sort of trying to like hide away, and then send as many swarms of bugs and bees and spiders and stuff, and to, attack Lung, this bad guy whose powers is like established is that like the more he fights, the more powerful he gets, and like he starts like transforming and shooting bursts of fire and stuff. It's a good way to like it's not so much like focused on having like a great well choreographed fight, as opposed to like sort of showing off like how her powers work and stuff against a foe that isn't really going to be defeated by it. Like in the first chapter, there's like a line she says, hold on, where like just she thinks about the word disperse. The word wasn't important as the idea behind it, which it gives. Yeah, like in like chapter 1, we like see sort of like how her mind sort of has to connect with all these like different insects and stuff, and how it's like it's less about like the language she uses and there's more about like the intent and like the ideas, and that's how she's able to control. And but even though she can do still stuff that's like very hyper specific, like getting silk from specific spiders. We see the ways in which it can be broad and how it can be utilized in very specific ways. And having an enemy that's like not going to be defeated by it, but is just going to like constantly like still be hurt and damaged and stuff, but is also, yeah, like too strong for her to deal with specifically. Is a good way to explore those powers.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that is interesting in the fact that this is the first fight we get, because it's since this is written in first person and she can barely see what is happening, instead of getting a visual description, you get this like feeling of what she can tell about what is happening through all of her bugs. And so it's just data. She thinks about it as data. It's like vague outlines of people that she can tell by the space between her bugs. There's like a lot of like hive mind aspects to it, but she herself is like, it's not that she's seeing through them, she's kind of getting a feeling from what is happening all around, and she gets the instincts. She talks about the simple instincts that the insects get to run away from the fire. So it's not a visual, it's very much something that can only have this effect in prose. It's dark and she can barely see anything. She only starts seeing when Lung uses his fire.
Yeah, and there's like it is a slightly like comedic way in that like she specifically like does not want the bugs to go near Lung's cock, because then she would get like a map of like how his cock would look, and she doesn't want that.
Yeah. At one point she controls like one specific bee, and she uses this bee to weave around him and get all the way to his eye and stab his eyeball. Like it gets pretty violent.
I think in terms of like also comedy in the scene, I think the fact that they're just like, let's go kill some kids is like slightly morbidly funny.
It is.
I'm not sure if that was the intention or not, but yeah, it is the intention.
I think it is, because he says that. Let me look to how it's actually written in the chapter. Like at the very end, the first he says like, Lung was snarling, the children, just shoot, doesn't matter your aim, just shoot. You see one lying on the ground, shoot the little bitch twice more to be sure. We give them no chance to be clever or lucky, understand? There was a murmur of assent. Someone else lit up a cigarette, and then leaned over to light a cigarette for the guy next to him. In those moments that his hand wasn't cupped around the flame, I could see the gathered faces of just a dozen or so of the gangsters, gathered around Lung. In hands, waistbands, and holsters, I could see the dark metal of guns reflecting the orange flame. If I had to hazard a guess, all of them had weapons. They were going to kill kids? The fact that there is a gap between him saying that and her thinking about it, like she first focuses on the fact that they had guns, and then she thinks about, oh wait, are they going to shoot kids? I think there is an intended comedic effect. It feels like it.
Yeah, no, I think I'm gonna like say on it is like, it is a part of, it is supposed to be like sort of morbidly funny. That their plan is just to kill kids.
Yeah, which morbid humor is common in this story. As you mentioned, like in the middle of the fight, she stops to think about, oh, I could hurt him with bugs in his cock, but then I would know the shape of his cock, and I don't want that. Like there is definitely a lot of morbid humor within in the middle of a very serious scene. So by the end of it, she can feel how hurt Lung is, but Lung keeps getting more powerful. Oh, actually, something else. Like, looking at this as a superhero story, I really like that these are the two powers that we get. First, for multiple reasons. First, because we get to see how a power that looks weak can be very effective. There is a matchup going on where, despite this, Taylor's power is very weak against Lung's, because he keeps getting stronger and healing himself, and the flames kill the bugs, so there is a matchup there. But especially the fact that it's not a guy that flies and punches stuff real hard, and it's not just a fire power. It's not oh, there's a guy with fire, there's a guy with ice, there's a guy that punches stuff real hard. No, like there is multiple elements to it, where he's starting to turn in this dragon-like gargoyle thing, but it's slow. He has to keep going in the fight, so he's more vulnerable at the start. And it's not just that he has fire, it's that he's becoming something like a dragon. I think it's
Yeah.
very creative to start with like complicated powers instead of easy or into stuff that is easy to understand.
Yeah, you did like mention that like he does he turns into like something like a dragon,
Yeah, he grows
which is
wings.
like sort of like foreshadowed by the fact that like he does have like tattoos of like Eastern mythology dragons on himself.
Yeah,
I think it's like a good way to sort of like tie into like that sort of uh yeah, it ties it a lot of, like, back into his
and the
identity.
mask as well. This is cool because when you say like, oh, they have costumes, you immediately imagine like flashy superhero costumes. But if you think about it, this is his costume. He has a power that is related to dragons and fire, so he has a big tattoo of a dragon to show it. And so like it works character design into it without having to rely on everyone having a stupid costume, which there are,
Yeah.
but you can see how it just feels like a more realistic take on it. In like a Marvel or DC story, this guy would be like fucking obnoxious. He'd be like 3 meters tall and he'd have a big red cape or something. But here he feels
I
like a guy.
yeah, a lot of like Asian themed supervillains in particular sort of have some really lame costumes and like that I sort of like seen. Yeah, they didn't. It's sort of just like too stereotypical in like a way, and like it's too goofy. I mean, like all the costumes are goofy and stuff, but like, yeah, this is like it feels like a better Asian supervillain in terms of like yeah, like the representation of it. I think like also like while we're on like the topic of costumes, yeah, the beginning of chapter 4, we sort of like Taylor describes like what she has on her, which is like she doesn't have a disposable cell phone, but she does have like other stuff like EpiPens, pen and notepad, pepper spray, which we find out later why, and chalk dust. Which EpiPens are interesting because like she knows the danger of her powers like possibly causing someone to have an allergic shock and dying. She does have those, so she's not like not thought about how dangerous it is.
Yeah, the fact that she's walking around with that already tells you that she knows she might hurt people, but she doesn't want to hurt them that much. She only wants to stop them.
Yeah, pepper spray, which comes back because it turns out her father gave it to her, which is cool.
Yeah, it's a nice detail. Have you seen any fan art for these characters?
The only amount of visual of Worm I've seen is whatever you've posted in the Worm chat. So I know kind of what the look of Taylor is supposed to be like, but everything else,
Okay.
no.
I'm going to look for whatever fan art of Lung there is, just to give you an
Okay.
idea. And I will get these ready for future episodes, so I can always like show you a visual for a character whenever they show up for the first time.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So, how important are the Asian bad boys throughout the rest of the story?
They're quite important for the early section.
Okay.
This story is broken into a few different like big acts, and the first act is basically like about the local villains in Brockton Bay.
Yeah.
So they are going to show up quite a lot, actually. Well, getting to the end of chapter 4, Taylor thinks that she can't defeat Lung, but she has successfully stopped him from murdering kids because he can't keep fighting that way, and he's probably not going to go after those kids, whoever they are. So she tries to
Yeah.
move, but as it turns out, Lung's transformation gives him lots of small, like minor powers, one of which is super hearing. So he finally managed to pin down where the attack is coming from, and she gets attacked in a, in a much more direct way. Like she tries to use her bugs, but they're useless. He has too tough of a skin. The bugs basically die from the heat of his body. She pepper sprays his eye, which stops him for just a couple of seconds, while before it, if she thinks how it should stop a normal person for like half an hour, but Lung just heals through it. He just face tanks the pepper spray. And when it
Is
yeah,
there you go. On.
when she believes she's going to be killed by his flames, a creature appears, which she describes as a vehicle-sized mixture between lizards and tigers, and one of them jumps off the building with Lung. There are other people riding those two creatures, and we get a. If you have anything to say about it, because I'm going to describe all the new characters.
No, you're gonna go. I was just gonna like ask if there's like how much more they actually explore Lung's abilities, because it seems like sort of endless. But I think like we can just kind of like get to that eventually.
Well, Lung is a recurring character. He appears a couple of times, so there's going to be more of it.
Yeah, so just we could talk about the next batch of characters that show up.
So there, 3 of those creatures appear. One of them jumps off the building with Lung, and the other 2 are being ridden by people. A man dressed in black clothes with a stylized skull mask, Gru, introduces all of them. Bitch/Hellhound, who is controlling the creatures, who turn out to be dogs. Tattletale, who seems to know more than she should. Last and certainly least, Regent, who is dressed as if he's in a Renaissance fair with a white mask. As Taylor finds out the kids Lung was going to attack was this group of supervillains, who not only did she help save, but they also confused her for one of them. Gru offers Taylor a ride away, but she refuses, so instead Tattletale tells Taylor that a hero is coming and that she should leave the scene before he arrives. And as you give your thoughts, I'm going to look for fan art of all of those.
Okay, so we're talking about. I think that happens in the start of chapter 5, right?
Yeah, it's chapter 5. Yes.
I thought of it certainly like is interesting the way that like as we explore and see throughout chapter 5 and 6 of like because of like what her powers are and like the way her costume is like it's hard to, and she's like aware of this, that it's hard to be like to come off as a superhero because
she looks creepy.
Obviously, like it's like weird insects. Yeah, it's creepy. It's like weird insect powers. It's like gloomy, and it like sort of goes against her own like desire to be a superhero. It is, again, it's sort of like there's like a sense of humor to it, like that she is like aware of it. It's like contradictory, but it's like intense. What was it? Yeah, I guess like contradictory is like it's intentionally contradictory, in a way to like sort of explore that. But like it does like also of course like it saves her ass in the end, because like there's no way that she could have fought off all these other characters.
Yeah.
The fact that there is like disputes between different villain sides also adds to a greater sense of like the sort of like world. The fact that one of the characters' name is Gru is kind of funny, but and bitch.
And bitch, who we're told the heroes call her Hellhound because they have to be PG-13, but she wants to be called bitch. She prefers bitch.
Yeah, and apparently, at least like from what like Taylor thinks, is that they're teenagers. Regent, Telltale, and bitch.
Oh, they are all teenagers.
Which,
yeah.
So are they also going to be members of her school, or?
Well, depends on how much of an answer you want.
Okay,
we,
no.
we do get a comment that a lot of the just normal civilian members of Asian Bad Boys go to her high school, and it's
We do.
specifically
Yeah, we do hear that.
they are forcefully recruited into it. That's what we're told. They don't
Yeah,
join. They're made to for being like the group of Asians in a city in the United States.
which isn't that much different from how actual gangs
Yeah,
operate. There is a lot of forced bullying, coercion, corralling. Um, sort of like the gang that is the Wormheads that I'm now being forced to be part of. Those groups of
precisely.
thugs.
Though we aren't at the part of killing kids yet. We might
Yeah,
build our way there, but not now. So I'm only showing you then in their cape costumes because you have not seen any of their faces yet. Yeah, so they arrive at this scene. They get Taylor mixed up as a villain. They explain that Tattletale found out that they were going to be attacked by Lung, so they decided that it was best to just meet him halfway instead of defending themselves. But Taylor getting Lung all worked up and hurt before he can't even like see anymore. His eyes are sealed shut by how much bugs have gotten in there and the bee stings. So he's out of the fight.
yeah,
And this group gets there and they thank her for it. They believe she's a no. She actually says that she doesn't even have a name. So Tattletale calls her Bug. So she's a new
yeah.
villain that,
It's
well, as far as they are aware, she's a new villain in town.
yeah, yeah. She's doesn't know her superhero name yet, which is also something that sort of recurs. I'm not sure if that has like a uh, significant weight in the story, like when she finally figures out her name. Um, I hope it's not Worm, because that's not a good name for
It's not
anything. If
Worm.
I'm being
It's not
honest.
Worm.
Is it Captain Worm?
No.
Oh,
Yeah, well, there will be a name eventually, and
okay,
we can discuss significance of character names as they show up. I also like that
sure.
the names are like quite creative. Like this guy controls darkness, but his name is not anything related to like the word dark. It's Gru, and this person seems to control dogs in somehow, but instead of the name putting her as like the person that is in the top of the chain, it's Bitch. She's like one of them. The person that
Yeah,
we don't know how, but she clearly gathers information. But her name is not about how she gathers information; it's about how she does with it, which is that she tattletales. But then Regent is the one that is a lot unclearer. Like why Regent and what is his power? We have no idea. I just really like that the author went out of his way to pick names that feel very specific to this story. I mean, like Lung. Most people would call him Ryu because Ryu is dragon, but no, it's Lung.
yeah. Like Tai Lung from Kung Fu Panda.
Maybe he probably watched Kung Fu Panda.
Probably, though I don't think that had any amount of effect on the story. Any inspiration.
Oh, I don't think I told you in which year this takes place, or if that was said already.
It has not been stated in the story, though we know, of course, it is, past the 90s. So, when does this story take
It takes
place?
place in 2011.
Okay. Significance?
Not very direct significance, but I think it's important
Sure.
to have like an idea of the average level of technology and how we are going to see
Yeah.
that like superheroes have sped that up.
Oh, yeah, no, because, I guess, we're gonna go, sort of, to chapter 6 now, and how it describes of Arm Master, the superhero, and the idea of tinkerers.
Yeah, so what happens is instead of fleeing, like how Tattletale told Taylor to do, she doesn't want to be confused, be taken by a villain from a hero. So instead, she waits for the hero to show up. And it turns out it's this pretty
Yes.
big shot guy called Arms Master, who is the leader of the local superhero team, like the Protectorate. And he is a tinker. Not a TA inker, but a TI inker. Like an inker. He's a printer. So we don't
Yeah.
get much detail into it, but it's technology related. And he has this halberd, which is his signature, that seems to have all of these weapons worked into it. And the concept of tinkers is not something I have seen in any other story. Like you get some specific characters like Iron Man or that girl from My Hero Academia who builds like things for
Yeah, the
yeah
gadget
the
girl,
gadget
yeah.
girl, but those are like
Tinkerette.
specific people. In here, it is common enough that there is a denomination for people who gain powers, who which allows them to, as it is described in this chapter, make technology that is decades ahead of what it should be possible with our current scientific knowledge.
Yeah, it's not like we don't get like a full specific like idea of what it is. Um, Arms Master asks her like, what does she know about tinkers as like classification? Like, what's the tinker classification? Which, it does allude to more. There's like certain classes and different types that have been uh sort of like decided upon and like uh yeah like listed out. There are different types, different classes of heroes, and one of capes, and one of them is tinkers. And what Taylor says is it covers anyone with powers that give them an advanced grasp of science, lets them make technologies years ahead of time, ray guns, ice blasters, mechanized suits of armors, advanced computers. And our master says, close enough. Meaning that like this isn't quite like what it is, but it's quite similar. Like perhaps like not like the power itself is not given them an advanced grasp on any like science, but it is something that is like utilized for a greater grasp of science.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah, we are going to hear more about Tinkers in the future. So this character comes off as like an Iron Man kind of character. His power is not that he's super powered, he can make really good technology. So he's dressed in this full suit, so you can see like the lower half of his face. And there's a shit ton that goes on in this interaction. There's so much stuff going on in their conversation. Like she thinks about like first there is the element of a superhero she looks towards. That she knows this guy, he's
Yes.
like one of the good ones. But then there's
The
also
first person, the first character in 6 chapters that she actively likes.
yeah. But there's also the fact that she doesn't know him. This is like an identity, and she thinks about this. And there is an element of like attraction there. She thinks about his smile and how he could get like all women over him with his smile, and she's like ashamed to remember
Yeah.
that she used to own a pair of underwears with his symbol on it. There is a relationship with authority there, because before we saw her being like really hard on Mr. Gladly for being like a teacher
Yeah,
interacting with the
yeah.
kids.
She
But
like
here she is a figure of
first, yeah,
authority that she's kind of into it.
yeah, yeah. Like that was sort of like what like I was sort of like alluding to at the beginning. It's like an interesting parallel between the two, how she sees them.
Then, well, I can just describe what they talk about if you want.
Yeah, you can go for that.
So first Taylor tells Armsmaster what happened, why she attacked Lung, who showed up. She describes those people. She explains that she looks creepy because of her costume, but she's a hero. And for a moment, she thinks
Yes.
that Armsmaster has like a he's forced to try to push her into joining the wards, which are the under 18 superheroes. But instead, what he asks is who is taking credit for defeating Lung. Taylor can take the credit, but that would mean becoming enemies with the Asian bad boys and make her a target for Oni Lee and Bakuda, which is a character we both of them, Oni Lee and Bakuda, are only mentioned here, but Oni Lee was mentioned before. He's like the second in command of the Asian bad boys, and from what Taylor says,
Bakuda.
he can like teleport.
Yeah, and Bakuda is like a second supervillain that like we don't know anything about.
Yeah, the only thing that is told about us regarding Bakuda is that she's a tinker that can make bombs. And
Yes.
Taylor goes like, well, if she can make bombs that are years ahead of what technology, like basic science, capable of, then I don't want to mess with that. Or if she wants to take credit for Lung, then she can join the wards so the heroes can protect her as she is now a part of them. But Taylor ends up letting Armsmaster take credit for defeating Lung for her own safety. It's an interesting dynamic because we immediately understand that things are more complicated. Like, we get a hero, we get a villain, Lung, and he's going to kill kids. Oh no, he's actually going to attack another group of supervillains. And she becomes a part of that in a way by inserting herself to the fight. And then we get a hero, and the hero, what he's worried about, even though he has an argument, he's worried about the taking credit part. So, like, the situation immediately gets a lot more complicated with, like, PR getting involved and potential backlash from other villains, making her a target, which could be a risk for people around her. And this Armsmaster guy, who she very much looks up to, is already showing her that this world is a lot more complicated. We don't know where it's going so far, but there is a sense that there is no clear-cut decision. Like, in a just world, she should take credit for Lung because it's her first night out and she really fucked up this guy that, as far as we know, is very powerful. But she can't take credit for it because that would put her in danger. Other villains would go after her and she's alone. And she wants to be alone.
Yeah, it's not that her like superhero, her dream to be a superhero is not destructive yet. Like, it's not like so self-destructive that she's willing to like thoughtlessly put herself at risk just so she can have her name out there as a superhero. She's still able to be level-headed about it.
Yeah. What Armsmaster says specifically is, hear me out. What you've done tonight is spectacular. You played a part in getting a major villain into custody. You just need to consider the consequences. Consequences, I muttered, even as the word spectacular rang in my ears. So there is already a dichotomy there, like, there are two ways that she can go about this, and both of them mean different things. One of them is safer, the other one is just. So, even though she did something spectacular, she has to consider the consequences. Like, there is no simple answer to it where she can get both.
Something that I was like trying to like look up is in terms of like I was trying to like find my note for it of the parallel between what was his fucking name? The teacher and Armsmaster.
Mr. Gladly.
Is that the way she describes it as Mr. Gladly? Yeah. In this chapter 6, she says, yeah, when Armsmaster says you don't look like a superhero, she says that stung, especially coming from him. It was like Michael Jordan saying you sucked at basketball. Which, it's, that shows us like how she sort of sees him, and also like she took the insult like a little bit more personally than like was intended. Yeah. And then you compare that to like how she talked about Mr. Gladly. Or how she thought about Mr. Gladly.
Yeah, he seems to be like a little... There is a little irony to what he's saying, but overall he comes off as pretty matter-of-factly. Like, he's pretty pragmatic. As soon as he jumps, the first thing he says is, "Are you going to fight me?" And she's like, whoa, 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 whoa. So he is like a no nonsense kind of guy, and he just said the obvious. You don't look like a supervillain, or you don't look like a superhero. You look. I don't
Yeah.
think he even use super. I think he
Yeah.
just says hero.
You don't look like one. You don't look like
Yeah,
one.
you don't look like one. And
Yeah.
from her side,
Yeah,
she's
there
like,
is.
ooh, but this guy's like my goat.
Yeah. And there's. You said, like, matter of factly, and there is a truth to that, because there's more times in, like, this chapter that it's just like, it just says, he said. Like, you're telling the truth, he said. You're a new face, he said. That's why we have a ward program, he said. Like, this comes up, like, more, so it definitely, like, feels more matter of fact. I don't think this is, like, a particularly, like, a writing mistake, as, like, as opposed to, like, completely intentional, I think.
I'd say it's intentional, yes. Based on the stuff that we're
Yeah.
going to see, like how characters think about stuff in the future when we start getting into other people's head, I'd say it's pretty intentional, yeah.
Yeah. I think like when, like, in terms of writing, people do try to warn you against just like having those sort of things, but they do, like, you should be, like, more creative, you should use different words and stuff, but to use the same word over and over again can add greater emphasis to certain ideas and themes. And I think that yeah, this is sort of an example of that.
Yeah. That's like, it's a very common advice to say that you should only use said, and I disagree with that advice because you're not always going for the same effect. You should definitely. It's a balancing act. Like everything is writing is a balancing act. Everything can have an intended effect, but too much of anything can create an issue. Like one thing that I
Yeah.
noticed, and this was in another scene, and this wasn't even in Worm, this was in Ward, because I was listening to the audiobook. And there was one moment where
Okay.
basically there is like a couple I said or he said, or then there's like a couple characters talking at the same scene. And so every time that they say something, it has to be identified who is talking. And there was a sequence of like very short exchanges between a group of characters, but it's like word, said, word, said, word, said. And because I was listening to an audiobook, that stood out more, because I was hearing the narrator saying said the exact same way every time. And so in those moments, it would be
Okay.
better to use a different word.
You see, I also agree with that because I just controlled F'd it, right? Arms Master, like, after he says a thing, it says he said 5 times. But the phrase I said was used 9 times in this one chapter. Yeah, I think, like, that probably could have been changed a little bit. There's still, like, a matter of factness to that conversation, but I think, like, it's, yeah, I would have changed a couple of these I said from Taylor's own quotes, words.
Yeah, when it's spread around the chapter, you don't notice, but whenever something brings attention to it, it can jump out a little bit. I got into that topic because I think it is like a lot of things in writing, and we are going to get to at least 2 others, I think, in these episodes, because there are things I want to share. I think that there are advice that people give away way too often, and they don't properly explain it. This one of using said, like there are people that will outright say, only use said, never use anything else. And that's bonkers. Like, that's not true.
Yeah, no. I've heard, like, opposite sentiment of, like, never use said. But the sentiment of always use said, that's a little crazy to me.
Yeah, the sentiment of always do X is whenever someone
Or never do X.
every time you should do this or you should never do this. Sometimes it's hyperbole, but for someone that is getting into writing now, not saying that I am, but a person that is getting into writing and they see everyone say you should always use said, they're probably going to take that very literally, and it can be hurtful to a new author's like development. to give them the impression that this is
Yes.
actually a rule and not a rule of thumb.
Yeah, there is like general advice for writing in any like sort of like art form really that is like helpful and useful, but I don't think there's any like rule that is like necessarily like always correct. Some of them are, but like for example, there's like you shouldn't ever start a story with 3 weeks earlier or whatever. Because like there's like not really a point to it. That's like a common advice. It's like don't start that, just like start the story where it starts. And that is good advice. But if the specific like intent of the story is that it's supposed to be like this anachronistic, like you're trying to piece together the events of this story, like the movie Memento, for example. You can have it start with 3 weeks later, because then there's like the first piece to the puzzle that the reader is like supposed to put together. Um, it's like sort of like things like that, where always like take every like piece of like advice with a grain of salt, I think, and like try to like think of like how it actually like works into the thing that you're actually making.
Yeah, because like it's all down to the effect. A story can be recontextualized all the way up to its last line. Until you don't get to the last line, you can't actually claim to know everything about it. So, like, everything can be built upon. A story can be lying to you from the first line, and you will only know it when you get to the end. So if you open up a story and you immediately go, this is wrong, you don't know because you don't know the intended effect. And as an author, there could be effects that you are working for that are not immediately apparent. Like one of the things that I was going to bring it up is the idea of the first line. You have to have a killer first line. Your first line, and then people will say your first line has to have action. Your first line has to start like this. But the guy that came up with the first line thing, he was an editor working for the publisher, and he came up with it as a way to see like recurrent themes that existed in all of the manuscripts that he ended up accepting. So he came up with a way to go through manuscripts faster because he had to go through dozens of manuscripts, hundreds of manuscripts. It's not a writing advice, it's an editorial advice, and people don't explain that. Like this also ties into that idea of like, everything that happens in a story has to be progressing the plot. No, everything that happens in a story has to have an effect. If it does not have an effect, then it shouldn't be there. And progressing the story is one potential effect. Like, you should be moving the plot forward, like, maybe 80% of the time, but there is no actual way to quantify this. It's a whether it works or not. If you take the first line of Worm, there is no action, but there is intrigue, even though it's very subtle.
Yeah.
And it just, like, how many people are actually going out there and opening up a book, reading the first line, and being like, I don't like this first line, I'm not going to keep reading. Like, readers don't do that. That is an editor thing and a very specific branch of editor thing. Like, you don't need to have a killer first line. You need to have a intrigue show up, maybe like in the first 2 paragraphs. And bringing all of this back, I mentioned this because there is one very important chapter coming up, which is the Danny interlude, which is the best chapter so far by far. And if you show it like in a vacuum to a lot of people will go and say, show, don't tell. There's nothing being shown. It's just telling. But that does not keep it from being the best chapter in the story, even though it is a whole chapter of just telling.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna be honest. I think when I like first like started like reading Worm, like I clicked on Arc 1 Gestation, and it immediately takes you to the interlude. If you click on like that, the interlude, And so I did read this first. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute, wait a minute. I'm actually like at the end of it. It took me to the end of it for some reason, and then I had to go back again.
Oh,
And I would say that this interlude is actually like a really good start. I was like into the story as it like went through.
that's interesting. That it's like completely
Yeah.
accidental, but it ended up coloring your read of it.
Yeah, it's like I so like going through like this chapter in particular, like how it starts off sort of because we're completely like stripped from like the perspective of like any actual character, and we're told about like the origin of the first cape, the first known cape, and it as we're told about this like golden skinned man with long hair who's like tied to the hull of a boat, and he comes washing ashore, and it sort of builds up this character and this like the greatness and this grandness and this mythology of like capes and heroes, and then their sort of like legendary status is sort of cut because one guy just got like murked, just killed during like a fight between like a couple of guys playing basketball.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it sort of like escalates it and then like sort of de-escalates it in like that morbid humor that like I did, that like Worm is good at.
Worm is good, you say?
No, I said Worm's good at.
Ah,
I don't say
fuck.
Worm is good.
Ah,
no,
shit.
no.
Yeah, so this is what I meant when I said earlier that we keep going back in the timeline, because at first we get like, oh, world issues, think about how capes have affected the society. And then we get a description of the city, and it goes back to the villains of the 90s that were important to the situation that we have now, because the heroes took a while to get a foothold on the city. And then we go back to the 80s to see this story of this golden man that was found flying above the waters, I think. What I have taken... I'm just going to read the whole chapter, like the description for the whole chapter, and then we can go back to the start and discuss it bit by bit. We start hearing a TV documentary about how in the 1980s, a crew in a ship saw a golden man flying above the waters. A man gives an interview talking about how he was healed from his cancer by simply touching this man. I wrote this man, golden man, so the golden man has apparently not stopped doing good things around the world, flying to points of crisis and helping out. The TV goes off as Danny, Taylor's father, is lying awake in the middle of the night, worrying about his daughter who he heard leaving. He has been waiting for hours, pondering about what could have happened with her, cursing himself for not being able to help her. He thinks about his temper, which he hates and struggles to control, but manages to keep himself from going over to his daughter and lies down to sleep. Just a heads up, I know why it showed you the interlude first. It's because if you click on the arc on like the right side of the website, that is a tag. So like the way tags work in WordPress, like that is not it doesn't have an order to them. So whatever thing you click with a tag, it's going to show you the last post made with that tag. And the last post made with this gestation tag is the interlude.
Yeah, because like I thought like because it is like it's like chapter 1.01, that I thought that arc 1 gestation like that was like the beginning, and it immediately took me to the interlude.
Yeah, so go through the table of contents.
So like there's gestation, like act 1 gestation 1.01, 1.02, 03, 04, 05, 06, and then 1 interlude. And so I thought arc 1
I
like
see,
that was like you click on that and that's the beginning, but it's not. Yeah, and then it's only like as I went to the next chapter and then I saw like 2.1, I was like, oh wait a minute, I think I'm a little bit further.
Yeah,
made a mistake.
Yeah, when
this is a good story.
It's the best chapter so far.
It's a good chapter.
When stories like have an in-universe like a documentary or news coming on to give you information like that trope, I think it's done pretty well here because
Yeah.
it is actually something that would happen. Like there would be documentaries about this. There would be classes about how capes have affected the world. There would be like PR about
Yeah.
them. I think it's very well worked as a piece of world building, and also there is like some irony to the fact that Danny does not know that his daughter has powers, but he's hearing about this guy that is like the origin of superheroes, and he's not in it mentally. He just has it as background noise. He does not care about that kind of shit. He cares about raising his daughter, which he's struggling with. So the fact that he doesn't have a
Yeah.
line of thought about this golden man. He's just listening to it, so there can be something going on because he has been awake for like 3 hours waiting for her to come back. And the irony is that he does not know that she is walking into that herself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, no, I do like the way that it's again like sort of builds up. It's sort of like as like a story like picks up like momentum. It's like sort of building a grander narrative about superheroes. And then yeah, and then it sort of like talks about that one hero that just sort of got killed, and then the idealization of superheroes just sort of like died.
Yeah,
Because like
they're
oh, they're just
vulnerable.
people as well. You know, they're vulnerable, and then we sort of cut to that. It sort of like de-escalates it, and then we sort of zoom out of the TV, and we see Danny Herbert, like this, the dad of Taylor, who is also described as being like weak and nerdy and scrawny, but he does have like this anger in him that is like powerful and like threatening, and again you can sort of like contrast that with like Taylor in herself, where like she is also like nerdy and like gloomy and stuff, but also has her own power and
Yeah,
stuff.
there's a lot going on thematically here because what we get is him thinking about how he inherited his father's temper. So he's not strong, but he has his father's
Yeah.
temper, which could be dangerous. So he makes this oath to himself to not show it. But then we get Taylor, who has power and is dangerous. And she is thinking about how she has to keep herself under control. And so there is a very like
Yes.
easy to miss insinuation there that she might have also inherited the temper from the father. But the difference is that if she chooses to act upon it, it would actually lead to dire circumstances.
Yeah, as I was like going through this for the first time and thinking like this was like the first chapter, um, I did sort of think about like I was thinking about like this like the anger management as a sort of like a its own like sort of metaphor for like the superheroes and like how like that would eventually be explored through like Taylor, and it like immediately was. But then it turns out like it's not like it's like Danny starting off and then we see Taylor. It's Taylor and then we see Danny as like a sort of yeah, whatever. But yeah, like in a basketball game. After Skion's first appearance, just after 5 years after Skion's first appearance, which is like yeah the big first superhero, superheroes emerged from common rumor of secretly showing themselves to the public. So they were a thing, but like he was like the first like big famous one. Villains followed for suit after. It was heroes who shattered any illusions of parahumans being defined figures. In 1989, attempting to quell a riot over a basketball game in Michigan, the superhero named public as Vicar stepped in, only to be clubbed over the head. He died not long after of a brain embolism. Later, he would be revealed to be Andrew Hawk. The golden age of parahumans was thus short-lived. They were not deific figures that they had appeared to be, parahumans were, after all, people with powers, and people are flawed. Government agencies took a firm hand, and then it's sort of like, yeah, a firm hand cuts off. Um, yeah, yeah, well, I'm from, I'm from the UK, so I also know about sports riots and like it killing people. Yeah. Um. Yeah, they specifically use the word like deity, like deification of parahumans ended. Yeah, I think you said like earlier that like all of them are like known, even civilians that have superpowers are known as capes. Turns, I think they're actually called parahumans. Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, 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 yeah. We can go into like Danny's internal struggles, which is like in third person, as I've noticed. That's an interesting thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It does like focus a lot on like Danny's internal like in struggles and like how he's just like so frustrated and like they use like the words like making him feel ill and sick over like his inability to do anything, but he is also like because he refuses to reach a certain level of like anger and like lashing out at people. But he's also like very forgiving, as you said, of like trying to be like understanding to everybody, which I think like it's like a sort of like a character trait that we see in Taylor herself. There's also like a lot more like paranoia. There's a lot more paranoia, I think, that's established within Danny because compared to Taylor. Yeah. Yes. Mm. Yeah, in all those ways you're saying, like, he is like overthinking and like, trying to like be in like too many perspectives at once. And but he doesn't like truly actually know like what's going on actually. Like there's like this one line where it says like Taylor hadn't said much as aloud, but whatever had been going on has been mean, persistent, and threatening enough that Emma, Taylor's closest friend for years, has stopped spending time with her. Like that shows like a disconnect between like he doesn't actually know like because Emma like didn't like stop. You know, Emma is like a part of the bullies, which is like not something he's like aware of. Yes. Followed by the next paragraph, the immediate line is impotent. Danny has helpless was helpless where it counted. Which yeah, I don't know, it's like there's like a sort of sickness in my stomach as a sort of like just like I can feel the anxiety like this is like definitely the most like emotionally effective chapter of the bunch for me personally. And work it does. Yes. We also get like a sense of like that poverty in that like yeah like the out that they have like this old house and the walls are all incredibly thin and like he's in his room out of like he doesn't want to like bombard her like if she comes back in and stuff and he doesn't want to but also like he doesn't need to leave his room because he can like hear her coming in.
Yeah, and the house has like these walls that were never renovated, and in there is a description somewhere about how it has like exposed wire on the roof. I think that's when she goes to the basement. So it's like this old place, and this house feels. It's not that it's falling apart, but there is an element of like decrepitness to it. Specifically, also about how in this chapter we get two mentions to the fact that the left side of his bed is empty, because that's where Demon used to sleep. I think she was name dropped actually in this chapter.
I
Yeah,
don't
Annette.
know,
Annette.
but I think it's already been established that she's dead.
Yeah, so there is this feeling
Spoilers.
that this, yeah, but there is this feeling that like the house symbolizes their familial situation. Like he climbed into the left side of the bed, leaving the right side empty out of a habit he'd yet to break, and to pull the covers up around himself. So I said left side, it's actually the right side, but
Yeah,
there is like, though the walls are thin and they can hear each other, they don't actually go through the walls to talk with one another. So there is a barrier there that it is flimsy. They can get through that if they manage to communicate. But the house is
yeah.
empty and they can't build upon it, that kind of stuff.
Something I was like trying to like sort of like come up with a way to articulate is that like you did say earlier about like how Danny like wants Taylor to come to not confront her about the bullying situation because he wants the house to be like a reprieve, like an escape from like like the torment of the outside, like the bullies and stuff. She want to just come home and like stop thinking about it and like have a nice safe space. But said safe space is like falling apart. It's like
Yeah.
thin. It's old. It's cold. It's like, you know, they can hear each other as they're walking about, but they're not communicating properly. It does like the way in which like the living space is used, the house is used, is like a way to, well, show metaphorically. There is it is not like just about telling. There is like definitely like the use of the cell phone, the use of the house, like these are like metaphors and stuff, which like further explore these like, sort of themes.
Yeah, and it's very subtle as well. Like not much attention is brought to it. There might be a point of connection where as she walks through like the docks, there is this idea of sticking to the boardwalk, and as she goes beyond the boardwalk, everything is like poor and falling apart, and there are no street lights, that kind of stuff. And we see that we get a description of this rich-looking PRT headquarters, but there's also the poor side of the city, so they're not actually doing much to solve the issue, but also their house is falling apart, so that tells us that Taylor is like closer to these people, the common poor people, than she is to the heroes who she wants to become. So the layout of the city ends up being like part of the metaphor as well.
Yeah, I didn't think about that one. You're right.
Because she does think like, that there is like this anti-missile barrier around the PRT headquarters. It might not extend to the whole city, but it does make you feel safer. So, like, to which extent is that just an illusion? And then, of course, the chapter ends with, he will talk to Taylor in the morning, get an answer of some sort. He dreamed of the ocean.
So, yeah, what's the ocean, do you think? What's like the purpose of that?
I think there are a couple. Well, the main one in this chapter is that the only place that the word ocean comes up is describing when that ship found Sion.
That's
so
true, yeah.
It could be like, from his perspective, like just I don't remember the word for this, but there is a term for, like, when you're thinking about something before you go to sleep, you sleep thinking about that. So he was like absent-mindedly thinking about the ocean and superheroes, and he doesn't know why, but it's just because he heard the words ocean coming up in the documentary. And also, this is a bay. This is Brockton Bay. It is at the edge of something. It's at the edge of society. There is a sea there that where there was expedition, where there was importation and exportation, but that business has dried up. So it has only left the ocean behind. It's also again about the layout of the city, of being close to the ocean, and that being such a recognizable part of like the city. I believe I don't remember specifically what Danny works with, but there is a comment about him, like, let me find it.
I think he does
Yeah,
work for the docks.
Yeah, the man had told Danny that the rival project for the docks were being cancelled, and that, contrary to promises, there were to be layoffs rather than new jobs for the already beleaguered dock workers. So he also he played a part in he was a part of the group that was left out of work in the past, perhaps, or at least he was connected with them, because the people that were left out of work were like his peers and he knows them. So he cares about this like societal angle of it, of the beleaguered dock workers specifically, he thinks. And so he's also dealing with some like sort of injustice, and he sees that from a more adult angle, as that is a part of his job. And while Taylor is like starting to get to also see like the poorer side of the city, but she's doing that through the Cape community, through the poor people living there. And he's looking at it as more of a, what can a normal guy fix about this? Like a guy without powers, a guy who just works there. But he very much empathizes with the dock workers, and so he probably spends a lot of time like fishing or seeing the ocean. So he's dreaming of the ocean.
Yeah, and it probably is like just like, I guess like why it sort of like worked as a first chapter to me was that like it sort of, because it's like it starts off with the ocean of like this superhero coming in on a boat, like sort of strapped to this boat and stuff, and sort of it ends like that's how he like enters, and then we have Danny's dreaming of the ocean. It's sort of like, and then we go back into Taylor's perspective. It's like she's giving off the effect that like she's like the hero that's sort of arriving, in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like people have arrived here through the ocean, through their boats and ships, and now there's like basically the new types are also arriving, like another kind of people also arrived through the ocean, which is how we quotation marks around the we. It's how we colonized this place before, and now there's something else that is like kind of us, but not exactly us, arriving as well.
Nice. Okay. Oh, there's also like before we sort of like move on or like finish, of like the times in which Danny has lost his temper, which is because like he's like described as being like, you know, scrawny and weak, but like his anger being like powerful enough, and like 4 years ago he had lost his temper with Annette for the first time, breaking his oath to himself. That had been the last time he had seen her, which is certainly like, and knowing like the loneliness and like the like effect that's had like onwards, it sort of like reinforces the idea of like why he wouldn't want to lose his temper like yet again, because like I don't think we ever find out why he lost his temper with Annette, but we can tell how much he's come to regret it. You know, that's a good line, good couple lines.
Yeah. As that paragraph continues, it also says Taylor had been there to see him shouting at her mother, but he was fairly certain she'd heard some of it. It shamed him. So it brings it back to the thin walls. Like there, some information goes through, but not enough. Like if they open the door and talk face to face instead of through the walls, they might be able to communicate better. But instead, they're just like catching glimpses of it. It also like it reminds me of how it is described that Taylor feels things through the bugs, that it's not she doesn't see it directly, but it kind of arrives to her. She gets part of the information.
Yeah.
It seems to be echoing that sentiment here.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah. Didn't think about that, but yeah, you're right. Any other notes on this chapter?
I
The
do
final
not have
interlude.
any other notes. No.
All right. Well, I think that's that all wrapped up. Um, yeah, those are all my thoughts. I think.
Yeah. So who do you think is pregnant?
What?
The arc is called Gestation. Who do you think is
Oh.
pregnant?
Oh. Huh. Is that actually gonna be a thing? That someone's pregnant?
No.
Oh. Why is it called gestation?
So anyway, that is the end of the first arc. We hopefully, well, not hopefully, but we gladly end on a high note because the last chapter is definitely the best, I'd say.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I think that's a common sentiment among the fan base from what little of it I've heard. People seem to really like how it's like this. There is drama going on, but it's like teenager edgy stuff. But then it pulls you back, and it's this like guy in middle-aged guy like struggling to communicate with his daughter. It suddenly like brought back down to earth a whole lot after a big ass fight that we didn't saw much of, but was like this very heightened danger thing. But then she goes back home, and now we're seeing something that is a lot more dramatic. Like it shows you that it starts there with the bullying, then there is like a superhero adventure, and then it goes back to something much more dramatic. So this story is like kind of telling you that that kind of superhero stuff is going to happen, but this is what we will be getting back to.
Yeah, is this like the last time we see Danny's perspective? Or is it coming back?
I think it is the only time we get his perspective. I believe so.
Alright.
Unless I'm mistaken, every interlude has a different perspective. It never repeats. I'm pretty sure that is the case.
Well, that's been Worm, and this has been Brain Worm. Who is the brain and who is the worm?
Yeah, leave your comments down below, discuss about it, figure out who was the brain, who was the worm, and why, and what does it mean, and what you liked and what you didn't like, and what you think we should do more or less of. The only thing I'm going to say is that as of chapter 1, we have met my favorite character, and I'm curious to see, not chapter 1, arc 1, I'm curious to see if they will stay my favorite character or if that will change over the course of these rereads.
I don't know if I have a favorite character yet. It's a bit too early to tell. Is it perhaps Bitch? Is Bitch your favorite character?
No.
Okay. Alright, where can we find you, Amy? Once again.
Oh, you can find me on linktr.ee/Amy Warrel, which is WARREL. You can find me at thedeathless.net, which is where I publish my Isekai Fantasy web serial, and also at the Deathless on Blue Sky. What about you, my co-host, who has been bullied into making a podcast where we spend 2 hours and 20 minutes talking about the shortest arc in the story?
Yeah, I did notice that. Yeah, my name's Yakuman. You can find my other podcast where I talk about something that's significantly better than Worm. You and Idol Precure. At Let's Talk Precure. That's the podcast on YouTube. On my friend's, I think she still goes by that one Lucario fan on that channel. But yeah, you can find Let's Talk Precure. That's my other show.
Yeah, links to all of that down below. Comment if you want to comment. Share if you want to share. If you don't know about Worm, tell us. If you think we're wrong, you can comment, and maybe we can like do a thing where we answer comments from previous arcs or something like that.
We could.
We can figure out like a different sections to have before we get into the actual discussion.
Yeah. Alright. It's been a pleasure as always.
Right. It was a pleasure. Till next time. Take that, you worm.